Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There it is, so you don't miss any of our football content this season. It has been, if I might say, fantastic. College football reactions presented by JLab. JLab has the best audio products in the game. They're ready to take care of you this football season. Traveling to watch your favorite team or just streaming the game at home, find the Blue Box at Walmart, Target, Best Buy, or go to jlab.com. Love their stuff. The Blue Box. Okay, I want to spend 10 minutes on college football. So my prediction before the year was Ohio State would lose at Autzen Stadium, would play Oregon again and beat them, and would play in the national championship against the Texas Longhorns. So right now, Texas and Ohio State, in my opinion, look like the two best teams along with Oregon. Notre Dame, Penn State, also very, very good. So again, it's big brands. You could put 74 teams in this tournament. It just doesn't matter. College football, even more than college basketball, because you have to have depth in football because there's a regulated level of violence. I think Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon feel like the best teams. I thought it was interesting against Indiana. I thought the game would be close. I like the Buckeyes close. I thought it was a real moment where everybody was selling me BYU. No, everybody is selling me Indiana. They looked nervous. I mean, the special teams gaffes, they didn't have the power. They didn't have the arsenal. They looked nervous. And it was funny. Josh Howard got some crap as they were rolling to a win. Cignetti's the coach. Yeah, Will Howard, who's a good quarterback. I don't know if he's an NFL guy, but he's a good quarterback, big kid.
Makes some plays. You're like,
I like him.
Into this,
Yeah, I kind of like him. Somebody probably drafts him. He's hard to evaluate because their O-lines historically, not this O-line, but they've got NFL high round receivers and running backs. So he's a hard guy. And Ohio State has so much better personnel than everybody in the conference, but Michigan and Penn State on an annual basis. Now Oregon has their kind of level of talent. But it was funny watching Indiana get up there, and some people were bothered by this gesture Will Howard did at the end. And it's really funny. I'm like, guys, Indiana came into that game, and for a team that has never won a huge college football game in my life, I thought came in with a lot of attitude and a lot of bravado. And I had no problem with Will Howard's gesture at all. And it's like, if you're going to come into the ring against the perennial world champ, okay, and you're talking shit, then if they do a little gesture, I don't want to hear about it. And Colin, you didn't like Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield did about 9 different gestures at Oklahoma. This was Will Howard 2 seconds. But I kind of found myself, I thought Indiana was obnoxious, a little cocky coming into the game.
Yeah, well, it starts with the coach. I mean, he's got a big opinion of himself. And the second half looked like the little kids versus the big kids. And if all these other teams hadn't lost as the day went on, I would have had no problem leaving Indiana at home. Listen, I didn't go to one of these schools. Like I'm a Big Ten guy or an SEC guy. I'm just an unbiased lover of college football. Anyone making the argument, just watch the games with your eyes. We have the evidence of the NFL draft picks where all the talent is. I'm watching the SEC games on the road. Oklahoma, I'm sure they got 5 or 6 guys on defense that are going to be drafted. And these environments on the road are so hard in the SEC. If you put Indiana in the SEC, I think they struggle to sniff 8 wins. I think they get rolled. Yeah. And obviously they benefited this year from playing nobody. They're a great story, and I appreciate it. But up until all these other teams with 2 losses lost last night, I would not have cried for them if they didn't get the invite to the dance. Now, just because of record, they probably will. But I would bet on them to be one and done and see it. And listen, listen, I know you talk to Clad a lot. I can't fathom watching all these games and thinking the Big Ten talent. And they're 6-6 and they're 6-6. Well, just watch the 2-team play. Watch the speed of guys on defense at Auburn, who's I don't even know what their record is. They're going to end up going 5-7. The talent discrepancy between them and Wisconsin on defense is fucking wider than the Grand Canyon. And yet we argue this every year. It's like, guys, take a deep breath. Let's just watch the games and go no one says that about the Big 12. We all acknowledge, the Big 12 is a fun conference, but it's not that talented. But we always argue the Big 10 and the SEC. Well, if you removed Oregon, the Big 10 would be terrible this year. And let's face
Right.
it, that's not a Big Ten team. You guys just got them this year. So it's like Ohio State's carrying you. The rest of your conference,
Yeah.
talent-wise, looks down. I watched the SEC, and I get it.
Yes.
They got a lot of 3 and 4 loss teams. The talent on their teams is night and it's just harder to play more talented teams. On top of that, because of the television networks now, they're playing all these night games, these road night games against a bunch of NFL defenders is way more difficult than the Big Ten. Is that even arguable this year?
No, I mean, I watched Oklahoma. I thought they played a perfect football game against Alabama. They just were well coached. They were buttoned up. Their quarterback had movement. They were they gave Alabama some fits. I mean, I watched that game and I was like, Jesus.
But they're good on defense. They have NFL guys on defense. Well, Venables,
yes,
Coach Clemson, a bunch of pros, like he knows what it looks like. Offense is going to be a problem for him, but no one's going to argue that Venables and his defense is going to be good. And they handled Oklahoma. I thought the same thing about Auburn. I'm like, I don't know most of these players on Auburn. Shit, they sure look good to me.
And you're a former NFL scout.
Doesn't that jump out sometimes when you watch these SEC games, even when their records like 6-6? You're like, I know they're struggling to win games, but they got talent on the roster.
If it doesn't really matter how many, I mean, I think Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Notre Dame, and like a Georgia, Ole Miss. I don't really buy Penn State.
See, they're in because they didn't play anybody and they only had the one tough game. Right. And Ole Miss,
and they're lucky because
Ole Miss is out.
Washington,
probably, right? But if you told me Ole Miss played Penn State on a neutral field, I'm taking Ole Miss. So am I.
And I think Jackson Dart actually is going to be like a second-round pick. So I mean, they have the better quarterback. It was funny.
Florida's a good example, aren't they? I'm watching them, and I'm like, if you put them in if they made the 12-team tournament right now, and they were playing Penn State in the first round, where's most of the money coming in on that game? On Lagway, if he's healthy, on Florida, right? And if you told me Florida played Notre Dame. Like, I'm not saying that Florida would win that game, but you can't tell me that, like, you would be surprised if Florida won.
So I'm going to throw this at you. My connection to USC. I'm a homer. So I was saying this. It's not the South. LA is distracted. You're going to be more patient. Jen Cohen's not running Lincoln Riley out. The boosters aren't going to step up and pay him the $70 million he's owed or whatever it is. They're building a $300 million facility. The NIL collective at USC is $13 million. They're not writing another check for Lincoln Riley. But I was texting somebody inside USC athletic department. I said, if you beat Penn State in overtime this year and you had the opportunity, overtime at the Coliseum, I said you would have beaten LSU, Penn State, your rival, with 9 returners on offense. If you just go get a quarterback like Oregon did in the portal, you bring back the entire offensive line outside of center, all of your receivers, all of your tight ends, and you had a very good recruiting class last year, defensive line, the best they've had since Pete Carroll, but they all redshirted. And I'm like, you're a quarterback and maybe a defensive tackle and a corner away from being really interesting. And somebody said, hey, thanks for the optimism. And I'm like, no, that's what you really are. Like with Brian Kelly, I don't know what I get week to week. USC's games, John, they all look the exact same. They lead in the fourth quarter. I mean, take the Michigan game out where it felt like they were playing from behind. They were playing chase. Every game looks the same. They just don't, they're not good enough at quarterback. And they're too young on the offensive line to seal it. But I was talking to a friend about this, and he's in the South, and I said, it's just different out here. It's not the beginning and end. No boosters writing a $50 million check for Lincoln Riley. They just paid $300 million for facilities. And I said, when I look at coaching, I said, do I get the same kind of team every week? Brian Kelly's a bit of a mess, and he's not really likable. People like, the players like Lincoln. They're not a lot of guys transferring. The coaches like him. He built a nice staff. So my take on USC is the advantage to being non-SEC is you get another year to 2. Shit, they kept Clay Helton around forever, and he was over his skis. Your thought on USC?
I would fall under the USC guy that you texted that you're a lot more optimistic than me. I mean, they're probably going to get killed this week, right, and be 6-6.
Yes.
So last year was a devastating year for Lincoln, right? It was not thought of highly, and they had a better record than this year, right? In a conference too that was really down. So you look back to Michigan and Minnesota. Minnesota's actually pretty good on defense.
Well, Washington's in a rebuild, Michigan's in a rebuild, and UCLA's in a rebuild.
Here's the thing. Like, let's use Texas analogy with Sark. Sark started just buying sweet players. And maybe it's more just the Texas boosters and it's a little more aggressive there with football. Like, they knew they were going to the SEC. They have cared for a while. They've been dying for, like, make money legal, right? They were lined up. I wonder if USC, so far removed from Pete, has the same aggression. Like, if there are 6 or 7 guys that can immediately change your organization or your program, Caleb Downs, I saw you tweeting about him yesterday, who's immediately transfer portal, and really probably 3 teams put all their chips in the middle table. It's probably Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, right? Well, can USC start swimming in that end of the pool? Because I do understand if I'm a USC guy or a booster or someone around the program, like a liner, I go, well, I know for a fact, given the rules that are at play now, when we were here with Pete, we would have Caleb Downs. Maybe we don't get him, but he's definitely taking a visit and having long conversations with all of us. And it doesn't even feel like USC's dealing in that. And like the slow build, like there aren't slow builds anymore. You can quick flip it. And that's why everyone's down on Brian Kelly. It's like, you guys are in year 3. What's going on here? Right. And that's where I wonder if Lincoln, is he going to recruit hard enough? Is he going to be able to do that in terms of, like, listen, I'm not an Ohio State guy, but I do respect whoever the Caleb Downs is this offseason. You bet your ass that it's Sark and Ryan Day on the phone with that kid because they got the money. Well, does Lincoln not have them? And Dan Lanning.
Well, the knock on Lincoln, and I think it's fair, he doesn't recruit Southern California well. He has not engendered himself to Southern California coaches. He can be prickly and precious and sort of, he's a small town guy. Sometimes he feels aloof, and that does not work.
Do they care
in
enough?
High school recruiting?
Look at Michigan's a good example, right? They had Harbaugh, and they got that taste the last 3 years, and it was incredible. And then this year's couldn't be going much worse relative to what they've been. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, LSU's getting this quarterback? No, we'll rally the money, get Larry Ellison on the phone, and all of a sudden we have some package of $10 to $12 million. I don't exactly. There are a lot of discrepancies how the deal's structured, but we will pay you more than anyone else. Why? Because we care that deeply. We care that deeply. And it feels like, when USC was in their heyday, they really, really cared. Oregon has maintained that, right? From Bellotti to Chip to Helfrich to now through Lanning. Like, it feels like they were. It doesn't feel like USC cares enough right now.
And I think that's fair. I think Jen Cohen, the athletic director, does. Their collective's $13 million. So the people have stepped up, but the economy in Los Angeles is bigger than almost, it's bigger than Canada's. So it's like, or certainly thereabouts.
Shouldn't they be able to outbid some of these, if LSU and Alabama want a kid in the transfer portal and they're willing to pay X, shouldn't they pay X plus another 20% to land the guy?
Yes. I mean, if you look at sports from baseball, there are salary caps, but I think players know who's committed. You can see it in the NFL, like free agency, like people know Philadelphia is committed. San Francisco is committed. Chicago's not. And players can sniff it. Players can see it and smell it and feel it. And I think your questions are what I hear from my friends, and I'm probably more patient and too optimistic. I think that's reasonable. I will say this, and I heard it again today from somebody I trust. The fastest rising quarterback is going to be Jalen Milroe. He can be a bit robotic. It doesn't look pretty. But if Minnesota keeps Sam Darnold, as you're suggesting, and many will, there's going to be 7 teams that need a quarterback. Somebody's taking that guy. If the Raiders, we know the Raiders and Giants are taking quarterbacks. You start looking around this league, there's going to be another 3 teams taking quarterbacks. John Middlekauff, 3 and Out is his podcast at The Volume, former NFL scout. We chopped it up for an hour and 22 minutes, it looks like to me. As always, John, great
Happy
talking.
Thanksgiving. Talk to you soon.
Same. Thanks, buddy.